Officer Anderson, thank you for your moving statement to us. You were present, as you told us, at this murder. You testified at the trial. Speak to the motivation of the murder and what you heard about it at the trial.
The individual at the trial showed little to no remorse. If anything, his facial expressions were incredibly disrespectful, smirking or almost smiling when hearing some of the things that were said or done. He had a clear, known disdain for law enforcement in the community, very well known. And on that day of that incident, he baited an officer into a pursuit purposefully to draw that officer out of town to attack that officer. He had a crazy idea that he was going to teach that officer a lesson that day, and some of his statements supported that.
Okay. Sheriff Bosher, you spoke about supporting the legislation that I talked about. In your extensive experience running one of the country's largest sheriff offices, have you seen a substantial increase in the rate of dangerous but non-lethal interaction between your officers and criminal suspects? And what can we do to improve our ability to identify and measure these situations?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question, Senator. We have seen an increase, as I mentioned. We've seen a dramatic increase both on assaults but also on resisting arrest, which I think comes from the overall disrespect for authority and each other in general. Last night, we had 4 people resist arrest. Last night. It's not unusual for people to argue, to resist arrest, lawful orders, lawful commands, and that's why I think it's super important we collect the data per your proposed legislation so it can better inform the public and our training, but also that we, again, speak with that voice that this place to fight criminal charges or the police is in a courtroom. Everyone seems to think it's okay these days to argue or fight on the street, and there is no good outcome that comes from that.
Sergeant Penny, you spoke about the online radicalization of individuals who target the police and organized targeting of police officers. What is the relationship between the defund the police movement and the targeted violence against law enforcement?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. Yeah, you can have something that's benign as defund the police, like it was, just the logo. But once you take that on social media, the message proliferates with the hashtag, and I think that's what we've lost so much in discussion because we think of it as just being benign, but the reality is radical groups, individuals use this same content to incite violence against police. So let's think about it. In Minneapolis alone, it was trending with defund the police, right? Not that the city of Minneapolis wanted to burn down their own city, but I mean, even though they did defund it by $8 million, but the bottom line is it was that message of defund the police was trending on social media, and radical groups, individuals attached to it. And once that hashtag, once that image begins, being transferred along or proliferating through social media, more people are going to attach to it, and that's how you saw some of the riots happen over and over again. We need to have better regulation of these social media platforms. We need to have better control over the content that's being used to incite violence against police. Yeah, it may not necessarily be the benign image itself, but when that image is attached to hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag defund the police, hashtag kill the police, that's the thing that you have to worry about is what's proliferating with the message. And that's how those groups organize, Senator. Thank you.
Sergeant Penny, in your written testimony, you acknowledge that some good people only wanted to peacefully protest police brutality. Yet the research shows that police officers rarely use excessive force. For example, only about 1% of police shootings are unjustified, and yet it's sometimes used as an excuse to justify attack on police. Do you think that it's reasonable for critics to say that police brutality is the cause of attacks on police?
Absolutely not. First of all, I mean, we're talking about more nuanced type issues, you know. Look, we have to qualify what police brutality is, because if you think about it, an officer can be accused of use of force violations. I mean, and it happens all the time. But a lot of times when they're adjudicated in court, they come out that they did follow the NIJ use of force continuum, and these officers are acquitted, and the case goes away. So I think we do need to qualify what we're talking about in terms of this police brutality thing. But no, the bottom line is we cannot, under any circumstance, allow attacks on our police officers. Regardless of what these individuals say they're protesting police officers for, we're not going to give validation for it. In fact, I think we need to start holding individuals accountable, which we have not done a great job of prosecuting radical groups and people that incite violence against police officers using what we have on the books already, domestic terrorism policy. 18 U.S.C. 2331, Section 5, domestic terrorism essentially lays it out. The DOJ tells us that individuals that use force and intimidation for the purposes of changing governmental policy or acting in line with domestic terrorism. Okay, so why don't we have penalties for those individuals that do that? Thank you, Senator.